Okay, so we are going to do the last lecture, which is going to be on the criminal justice system. So we'll talk about a few concepts, but we'll also discuss the prison industrial complex, private prisons as well. So let's get started on just how to define the criminal justice system. So it's an organization that exists to enforce a legal code. So we have different components of the criminal justice system. So we have the police. This is the most visible link because they determine how to apply the law and control crime to keep order. We have the courts. They're there to either determine guilt or innocence. And then we have prisons. So why do prisons exist? What are the reasons for that? And so there's going to be three main ideas around it about why we have prisons. One is deterrence. It's to prevent crimes by threatening harsh penalties. And so we know that research shows that prisons are not a good deterrence. We have more and more prisons, yet people are still committing crime. It's not deterring people. Retribution. This is probably the one that makes the most sense, and especially if someone who is a victim of a crime. And this is to retaliate or take revenge for a crime that has been committed. So if someone hurt you, you want them to punish. You want them punished. You want them hurt. Rehabilitation. Reform criminals so that they may re-enter society. Again, this is all nice and hopeful, but the reality is that this is not the case, right? The recidivism rates are way too high, and we know that rehabilitation and deterrence, statistically speaking, do not work. That's not what it is. So the other one that I don't have on here, which is the fourth one, which is that to kind of protect other people, right? We want to put murderers in jail because we don't want them to kill again, right? It's for the sake of the protection of the people. Okay. Different types, what is crime, behavior that violates criminal law, punishable by a fine or jail time, other negative sanctions. There are two categories of criminal law: misdemeanors, which are minor crimes, punishment is a fine or less than a year in jail time. For example, something like public drunkenness. Then we have felonies, serious crimes, punishment more than a year. Even punishments in jail may be for a long time, death penalty, for something like murder or rape. And then we have delinquency, which is when someone under 8 violates a crime or engages in antisocial acts. So what I think was interesting about delinquency is that, right, the laws for people that are under 18 are different. They have different set of rules. So them violating curfew, they can't go to jail, right? And so for someone, who's out at 3 in the morning as an adult, you're not going to get in trouble. You're not going to go to jail for that unless you're committing, you're speeding, you're drinking and driving, other stuff like that. Okay. Violent crimes. So these are actions involving force or threat of force against others. And this includes murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault. Murder is the unlawful intentional killing of another person. Mass murder is killing 4 or more people at one time. A serial murderer is killing 3 or more people over a time or more in a month. Manslaughter is the unlawful unintentional killing of another person. Statistics to know: most of the statistics, men are the bulk of offenders and victims. Most murder victims and offenders are over the age of 18. Most murderers kill people of the same race, and poor people tend to kill and be killed. Rape. So rape is the act of violence in which sex is used as a weapon against a powerless victim. There are several kinds of rape: forcible rape, forced sex on an adult of a legal age; statutory rape, sex with someone under the legal age of consent; acquaintance rape, forced sex of people who meet in a social situation, something like date rape. And so rape is often go unreported, so the rates don't reflect the extent of the problem. Most of men are oftentimes the offender. Rapists and victims tend to be under the age of 25. That's why college-age women are the ones that are most at risk. And offenders and victims are, again, usually the same race. Property crimes. So this is taking property from another with force, without force, threat of force, or destruction of property. And so most frequently reported in victimization surveys is burglaries. And Black and Latinx have the higher than average risk of being burglarized than whites. Most frequently reported index crime is larceny and theft. Statistics on auto theft are relatively accurate. Insurance companies require reporting for auto theft. And so property crimes tend to be more accurate because of this, because whether house or renters or car insurance keep all these records. Okay. U.S. crime statistic. So in 2011, the prison population was just under 1.6 million people. Minorities are dramatically overrepresented among the incarcerated. So while Black people in the U.S. only hold about 13% of the U.S. population, they're almost 40% of the prison population. Latinos, Latinx, are only about 17% of the U.S. population, yet they're 23% of the prison population. And so what I hear often then is that, well, this is because they're criminals, right? That Blacks and Browns are again going back to the biological and psychological arguments, when there is no basis for that. And most of the research shows that there are racist policies that have been placed contemporarily and historically that are targeting these communities. Okay, U.S. incarceration. So who's in prison? Again, we got race, but we got female, we got age, we have non-U.S. citizens, so people that are undocumented, and this of course is outdated given our current situation. I think this is from 2010, and that's 10 years ago. And given the detention centers that we have now, I'm assuming that's probably, if not, it's doubled. And then we have violent offenders, public order, property, and drug offenders. And so prison industrial complex. And so here is a network of private companies and the government and politicians that greatly influence crime policy by putting people of color and poor people into for-profit prisons. So I'm going to show you a clip of how this works. So the clip that I showed you is basically about detention centers, but it's really how it works for private prisons. And so what happens? Politicians who play on fear by running on Get Tough on Crime platforms, state and federal lobbyists who represent prison industries and companies profit off of cheap prison labor, depress rural areas that depend on prisons for their economic survival, and prison companies that view the $35 billion spent each year on corrections as a lucrative market rather than imposing a drain on taxpayers. And so, yeah, there's a profit. Prisons are for profit, which is the contradictory of everything that it stands for, or what it's supposed to be, deterrence and rehabilitation, is that now there are a lot of people making a lot of money of people being in prisons. And especially when over half of the people in prisons are for nonviolent offense, tend to be more related to drugs. Okay, that wraps this up. I hope you learned a lot. If you have questions, let me know. Bye.